Welcome to the first in a series of videos on mental health at work from an Alberta occupational health and safety perspective. This series is intended to educate worksite parties about the importance of maintaining psychologically safe workplaces that value mental health. Although many concepts that will be discussed in this series are wildly applicable, the information provided in these videos will be primarily specific to worksites in Alberta. For more information on the topics that we'll be covering in this video, see the resources posted below in the video description. Before we begin, we have a disclaimer and copyright notice that we need to bring to your attention. We do our best to ensure that the information provided in this webinar is accurate and up to date. However, if there is any discrepancy between what is presented in this webinar and the OHS legislation, the legislation is considered correct. I'll give you a few moments to read the copyright notice. When we think of hazards to health and safety in the workplace, we often tend to only think of things like dangerous equipment, slippery surfaces, or other physical hazards. However, mental health issues at work also have real and serious effects on worker health and safety. For example, between 2016 and 2020, Alberta's Workers' Compensation Board claims for mental disease steadily increased. They were the second most common diseases resulting in WCB claims for that time period, and represented almost half of the top 20 claim categories in terms of total claim costs. WCB claims in this category included post-traumatic stress, anxiety, depression, and other mental health syndromes. It's clear that a paradigm shift is needed. We need to start thinking about hazards to mental health in the workplace, known as psychosocial hazards, in the same way we think about physical hazards. In fact, Alberta's occupational health and safety legislation requires employers to assess and control hazards to mental health at their workplace. In these videos, we'll talk about what mental health in the workplace means and provide some definitions of terms that relate to workplace mental health. We'll also look at barriers that prevent people from having good mental health at work and prevent worksite parties from creating a psychologically safe workplace. In addition, we'll provide information about hazards to mental health in the workplace and how they can be identified and controlled. And we'll also provide resources to help you better understand and improve mental health in your workplace, whether you're a worker or an employer. Let's begin by defining some terms. For example, what exactly do we mean when we talk about mental health? There are many definitions, but we'll use the definition provided by the World Health Organization. This definition says mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to their community. The National Standard of Canada for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace, which we'll refer to going forward as the National Standard, has also adopted this definition. People often think of mental health as an either-or proposition, in which people either are mentally healthy or they're not. However, this is an oversimplification. Mental health is more properly viewed as a continuum along which people experience varying degrees of mental health or illness. The national standard defines psychological safety in the workplace as the absence of harm and/or the threat of harm to mental well-being that a worker might experience. All worksite parties have a role to play in creating and maintaining a psychologically healthy and safe workplace, but there are many barriers that can get in the way. These barriers can be found among individuals as well as in the overall work environment. Let's look at some of these barriers in a little more depth. One major barrier to achieving psychological safety in the workplace is stigma. Stigma refers to unfounded negative attitudes and beliefs about an individual or group of people in their circumstances in life. These negative attitudes and beliefs can lead to discrimination, prejudice, inequity, and isolation. Stigma may discourage identification of physical and psychosocial hazards. Health Canada identifies three main types of stigma. Self-stigma, such as saying, "I can't have a mental illness," or "it's not that bad." Interpersonal or public stigma, such as being treated badly for having a mental health issue, and systemic or structural stigma, such as discriminatory or exclusionary policies. People who are subjected to stigma because of mental health issues may be too ashamed or afraid to seek treatment. This can create problems because the longer a mental health condition is left untreated, the more difficult it may be to treat. Another barrier to psychological safety in the workplace can be lack of information. Although mental health is an increasingly prominent topic in society, some workplaces still lack information that can be used to help prevent mental illness and injury. This information gap typically is of two types: lack of information about psychological health and safety in the workplace, including its prevalence and the impact it has on workers and the organization, and lack of information on how to recognize, assess, eliminate, and control the hazards associated with workplace mental health, known as psychosocial hazards. At work sites where this information is lacking, worksite parties may be less likely to adopt effective ways to ensure a psychologically healthy and safe workplace. The lack of information may also allow the stigma associated with mental illness to persist. Even if there is adequate knowledge and understanding of how important it is to have a psychologically safe workplace, resistance to change can be a significant barrier to achieving it. This resistance to change can take many forms. For example, people tend to be comfortable doing things the same way they always have and can be reluctant to embrace change. Worksite parties may have concerns that they will violate confidentiality, privacy, or human rights if they take steps to address psychological health. Workers may worry about having more rules and restrictions on behavior in the workplace, or how their pay, productivity, or privacy may be affected. Employers may be concerned about additional costs. To overcome these barriers and start creating a safe workplace in terms of both physical and psychological health, we need to start thinking about psychosocial hazards in the same way that we think about physical hazards. The national standard defines psychosocial hazards as elements of the work environment, management practices, or organizational practices that pose a risk to mental health and well-being. Examples of possible psychosocial hazards include exposure to harassment, violence, or traumatic events at work. These psychosocial hazards may only be a one-time issue, or they may be an ongoing or recurring hazard. Other factors can potentially affect psychological health and safety to a point where they become psychosocial hazards. The national standard identifies several such factors, including work-related factors, such as shift work, hours of work, job security, workload, interpersonal relationships, organizational change, and technological change. Environmental factors, such as indoor air quality, lighting, and noise, and personal factors, such as work-life conflicts, physical health challenges, family life, pre-existing depression, anxiety, substance abuse, or other mental illness. The national standard indicates that exposure to psychosocial hazards can negatively impact workers' physical and mental health in many ways. For example, people sometimes develop negative coping behaviors, such as alcohol or drug abuse, which can create further physical or psychological distress or lead to addictions. Under Alberta Occupational Health and Safety law, employers are required to assess their work sites to identify any existing and potential hazards, including psychosocial hazards. This requirement aligns with the OH&S Act's stated purpose, which is to promote and maintain the highest degree of physical, psychological, and social well-being of workers. Addressing psychological health and safety can help employers ensure that they comply with OH&S laws. Beyond being a legal requirement, addressing psychosocial hazards in the workplace can provide many financial, legal, and health-related benefits for all worksite parties, individually and for the organization as a whole. For example, workers are more likely to be physically safe when they are mentally safe. Productivity, morale, and job satisfaction increase, while turnover, interpersonal conflict, WCB claims, sick leave, and disability leave decrease. And there is a reduced legal risk in terms of human rights complaints or other legal actions that might be taken against an organization. To address psychosocial hazards in the workplace, they need to be included in hazard assessments, just like physical hazards. Once a hazard assessment has identified the hazards that could affect workers' health and safety, the next step is to take measures to eliminate each hazard or control the hazard if elimination isn't reasonably practicable. In this video, we looked at basic concepts relating to mental health at work and discussed some of the barriers that can get in the way of having a psychologically safe workplace. We also learned why it's important, beneficial, and a legal requirement for employers to address psychosocial hazards at work sites. To do this, employers need to include psychosocial hazards, not just physical hazards, in a hazard assessment. We'll look at how to do this in the next video in the series, Assessment and Control of Psychosocial Hazards. For more information about the topics we covered in this video, See the resources posted below in the video description. This tutorial series is produced by the OH&S Prevention Initiative, a partnership between Alberta government, industry, labor, and health and safety organizations. The following organizations contributed to this tutorial: Alberta Labour and Immigration, Alberta's Workers' Health Centre, United Nurses of Alberta, Workers' Compensation Board Alberta, Alberta Safety Council, Alberta Construction Safety Association, Continuing Case Safety Association, Alberta Municipal Health and Safety Association, Alberta Health Services, Energy Safety Canada, Alberta Motor Transport Association, Manufacturers Health and Safety